Okay, here we go. Hi, everyone. Here is my presentation on Choose Your Own Adventure Illuminated. We hope. Okay, here we go. Here we go. Okay. Choose Your Own Adventure has several selling points that I want to go over really quickly. The first being form follows content. A Choose Your Own Adventure structure not only explores principles of quantum physics, multiple realities, quantum weirdness, entanglement, uncertainty, which I think we're all pretty excited about, but it also relates significantly to Escher, and we haven't really talked about that parallel. The idea of moving both ways or multiple ways in time. The idea of multiple truths existing in the same space, which is sort of a hallmark of Escher's work. And Escher's evolution in his art from his early work, which was representative reality, towards his later work, which explored real figures put into impossible settings. So, for example, this image on the left here, which is a 1930 lithograph by Escher, which is a landscape. It's a representative landscape, whereas the one on the right, which was done 30 years later, has some realistic figures. We've got water, we've got a house, plants, and a lady, but actually a couple people in there. But when you look closely, you realize that those realistic figures have been placed in a situation that is impossible. And that juxtaposition is startling, and we really have the potential to create that within the Choose Your Own Adventure model. I found this really great quote about Escher. In Escher's work, there is an interaction between a given structure and a recognizable world. Before 1937, so this was his early work, the recognizable world served as the starting point from which a structure was to be reached. But after 1937, the structure became the starting point and was made visible by means of recognizable motifs. And this really speaks exactly to what we're doing with this structure conversation. I know it's really hard to talk about structure outside of content, and I'm going to get to that later. But in terms of a mode of working and a means of producing work, Escher himself, in his later work, started with structure and used recognizable, realistic-seeming talismans or landmarks within it to anchor it down, to give us the perception of viewing something that is true to life, and only when you look closer do you see the improbability, the impossibility, the illogic of it. So there's a wonderful parallel there, and I think it's really great that we're engaging in these conversations that begin with structure specifically for this reason. Selling point number 2, the audience experience. Brian and I talked a lot about how the audience has the potential to really buy in, particularly if we give them awards or rewards for making choices. So it's sort of like an Easter egg hunt. Random reinforcement, excitement. There's the possibility of making one choice at one particular moment and being surprised by something unexpected, hilarious, superly dramatic, super satisfying, super campy even. And once our audience has one of those experiences, they should be gunning for the next choice. They should be excited to make the next decision and see what's around the bend. We should be surprising them. And with that, we have a lot of power to draw our audience in and give them an experience that's really unique and really special. Not only that, but if you've ever read a Choose Your Own Adventure novel, they're written in the second person. So they're written to you as the reader. So you arrive at this house and you go in the door and you are encountered with a choice A or choice B. What are you going to decide? And we could potentially take that approach with our audience, treating them in the second person. We could have a facilitator, a writer, a director, somebody who is managing the process of audience choice, and create some kind of structure by which they make these decisions. And we can work this out later. It could be via applause, raising hands, they could shout out, we could pick a seat and make that person choose, we could ask for volunteers, we could throw something into the audience and whoever catches it gets to make the next decision. But there's real capacity for audience investment, which is very exciting. The biggest selling point to me is that many or most of the cohort expressed excitement about this idea in the room. There were concerns, there were reservations, but there was also repeated statements that this sounds fun. And I agree. I think it sounds really, really fun. And if we're having fun and if we care about creating an exciting, enjoyable, want to come back and do it again kind of experience for our audience, then that's a fantastic goal. So that's the third selling point, for me anyway. There's some really legit design concerns. How do we cue something that's performed in a different order every night? How does a stage manager call it or a board operator operate it? How do we build a set from multiple environments in a way that is flexible enough for Choose Your Own Adventure? Not to mention costumes, props, actor entrances. This is a complicated idea in many ways, even though on the surface, Choose Your Own Adventure is so familiar that it might seem even simplistic. So these are legit design concerns that we're talking about. Here's a few admittedly too short responses. These are not meant to be comprehensive in any way, but potentially. We could let it be okay for the seams to show. So when we're making a transition, the audience has just chosen a direction and we didn't know in advance what it was going to be, one of two options. We can build in a motif of house lights come up, audience sees the inner workings of the theater as we get the next scene set, and lights go back down and we go. We could all make the agreement that it's okay if they see the mechanics of this production. Board operation and stage management could become part of the performance. It's exciting, it's interesting, they're doing performative work, and we could allow that to be seen. We may or may not need to think about design in terms of a fringe festival scale, depending on the complexity of our material. So we might need to think about something that is small scale, modular, maybe with a couple of large elements that are very carefully placed, or if we have big lighting cues or big music cues, we put those within the structure very thoughtfully so that we are poised and positioned at that juncture of making that choice so that the transition can be smooth. The concerns remain. They definitely warrant further conversation and consideration, but it's possible. We would all need to be really flexible, helpful, and supportive of the challenge, so that's something that is just part of the package if we decide to go with Choose Your Own Adventure. Okay, here's a wee stylistic tangent. Choose Your Own Adventure could be in the style of a Hammer film. So below you'll see a link to a trailer for Dracula, which was sort of the quintessential Hammer film. Hammer Studios, or Hammer Films, was a British film studio between 1930 and 1985-ish, and they were sort of the hallmark of B-movie horror. Really campy, really melodramatic, big startles of music and dark shadows, and there are several reasons that we've come up with this possible stylistic anchor. Here's a few reasons why it occurred to us. It's campy, it's kitschy, it's melodramatic, admittedly so. Kind of like Choose Your Own Adventure, actually. This could give us a style in which to embrace the stereotype of our structure, to have a blast with it, to take it too far and see what's on the other side. Now, side note about the structure. In one way, this structure feels very much like murder mystery dinner theater. It's cliche. On the other hand, it's a radical way to empower the audience to be part of the story and to influence in a huge way the direction that it goes. So it's both radical and stereotypical, and we could make our peace with that. It could be both. It's a fitting genre for Poe. It's a derivative of the Gothic terror genre of the 19th century that he wrote in. And finally, we perform at Halloween, so why don't we embrace it, let our audience have a great time. So that's one note. Hammer is not tied to Choose Your Own Adventure. We could do Choose Your Own Adventure and have a different stylistic anchor. That's just one idea. Okay, the structure itself. The content that I'm proposing within this structure is the story of the fall of the House of Usher, but we would tell it first the straight way that Poe wrote it, and then with several different branchings off. So we would begin with the overture, the introduction of the mystery. This is all set up and we're only going to see this once. It's 5 to 10 minutes long, basic information that you need in order to understand the story. We enter the house, and immediately we're presented with a choice. Are we going to go find Roderick or are we going to find Madeline? Now, in this first round, punctum is telling the story. The audience is not yet choosing. And of course we choose Roderick because that's what Poe tells us to do. Choice number 2, which happens right here at this juncture, are we going to cheer Roderick up with art or are we going to medicate him with science and go fetch the doctor? Of course we choose art. Choice number 3, are we going to bury Madeline in the house or are we going to cremate her? We choose to bury her in the house, which leads us to choice number 4. Are we going to flee the house or are we going to escape via the story of Ethelred? Again, these alternate possibilities are just examples. We could choose whatever we want. Of course, we choose to flee the house. where we watch the entire house collapse into the tarn. Nothingness remains. Nothingness is terrifying or unfathomable. Escher even says man cannot conceive of spacelessness. We just don't have the space for it in our brains to understand what it is to have nothing. So, because we can't face that, we return to the start for round 2. This time the audience gets to choose. So maybe when they come into the house, they choose not to find Roderick, they choose to find Madeline. We go this way. That leads us to choice number 2. Are we going to conspire to help her escape the house, or are we going to get the physician to drug her with opium? Let's say we choose to try to help her escape. In the process of escaping, we arrive at a window. We can either choose to dive out the window into the tarn, or we can run up the stairs into the tower containing the oval portrait, which is another Poe story altogether, so we end up in a different world. Let's say we choose to dive into the tarn. Well, at the bottom of the tarn is an alternate universe where the house is friendly and everything's great. It's the bright castle from the song. And within that bright castle, we have to choose to either go back and rescue Roderick, or we could marry Madeline and reign over the bright castle forever and live happily ever after. So hopefully our audience has enough of a moral conscience to return to the beginning and get Roderick. So we go back to the start, and let's say this time we follow Roderick. Again, so go after Roderick, but this time instead of trying to cheer him up with art, we decide to medicate him with science. In fetching the doctor, we realize the doctor is a horrible villain, and we're faced with the choice to either escape into Roderick's empty hallway painting or kill the doctor. Let's say we choose to kill the doctor, and that leads us to the choice, either to hide the doctor in Madeline's tomb or throw the body in the tarn. So let's say we choose to go down to the tomb again, and in Madeline's tomb we encounter a door on the other side, or a lid in Madeline's coffin, an unknown door of some kind, and this time, instead of going back to the beginning, we go through the door to see what's on the other side. So we're in this alternate dimension world, and this is a punctum-created dimension. So the audience chose the red path, and then they chose the green path, and now we're into the blue path, which is punctum created again. In this alternate universe, we could have all kinds of things. We could have quantum entanglement, entanglement, quantum weirdness, multiple realities, plot points from within this world up here. They get reversed, they get replicated, they get twisted, played with in some way. In this world, this alternate universe, we could have Sabrina's 4-part quantum diagram that she made. We could have Audie's 3D movie, we could have Meg's rock opera, or we could have something else that we haven't found yet. But regardless, that journey leads us to some kind of a new understanding, a peaceful paradox, maybe even a joyful one. An unknown particle, we make peace with the unknown, with the paradoxical nature of our universe, and move forward in a probabilistic existence. So, within this structure, the devising model would look like this. We would start all together, all 14 of us, to create the entry into the house. Since we're going to repeat the entrance into the house 3 times, we might compress it or shorten it the second and third times that we do it. We might also work all together or in smaller groups on that overture introduction, the alternate dimension, and the ending. Each director would supervise one main branch. So once we make that first choice to either find Madeline or find Roderick, Brian and I would each take charge of one of those branches. And within those branches, individuals, pairs, or small groups would be commissioned to split and generate material for each new choice. The directors would oversee, streamline, coordinate with design, and glue it all together. The modules would be about 5 minutes long. It'll be important to build on what came before, so we'll need to work sequentially. And it'll be important to build towards an endpoint that fulfills the structural need to work with the alternate dimension and with a return to the beginning. So all 8 outcomes, even though in the show, every given night we'll only see 3 of them, each of those needs to be compatible with a return back to the start and with going through the door into the alternate dimension. So that's the constraints that we would be working within. Possible central questions. Is there any such thing as objective reality? And who decides? Does regret mean anything in this world where you can just go back and go back and go back when all possible outcomes actually exist somewhere? In a fragmented, blindered, probabilistic world, what is there that we can hold on to? So these are just some possible central questions to get the juices flowing. If you have any questions, please let me know. And that, my friends, is Choose Your Own Adventure. Thanks so much. Bye.